FLUP é apresentada pela Prefeitura da cidade do Rio de Janeiro, Secretaria Municipal de Cultura. Tem o patrocínio da Ternium, Itaú, Globo, por meio da Lei Municipal de Incentivo à Cultura, Lei do ISS. Apoio da Fundação Ford, Instituto Ibirapitanga, Instituto Unibanco. Parceria Consulado Francês. Realização Instituto 215. Assista agora a mais uma mesa do ciclo Palavra Falada. Jogo de Palavra, como o Islã se espalhou pelo mundo. Comikk, Emerson Alcaide e Roberta Estrela entrevistam Marc, o criador do Islã. Um gênero literário dado como em extinção, a poesia se renovou depois da criação do Islã na Chicago da década de 1980. Em animada conversa com seus principais seguidores, o criador das batalhas poéticas explica como elas atraíram e formaram novos leitores e autores nas periferias globais.
Salve, salve! Estamos começando aqui o nosso evento, falando de poesia falada, falando da palavra que não volta para a boca, todas essas vociegrafias, oralidades, escrevivências, para citar a nossa Conceição Evaristo, esse evento lindo da FLUP, Festa Literária das Periferias. Hoje estou aqui muito bem acompanhada, eu vou apresentar o nosso convidado mais que especial para vocês todos que estão assistindo a gente. E nós vamos falar disso, né, de Islã, e é muito especial mesmo o convidado, mas eu vou antes de apresentar o nosso convidado, apresentar as pessoas que vão estar aqui comigo. A ideia é a gente conversar, saber dos primórdios, saber curiosidades. Vocês estão ligados aí nessa cena do Poetry Slam, ligados, vão saber de várias coisas que só aqui na FLUP você terá, hein? Então, nosso primeiro convidado, Comikk Emre. Tá aí, Comikk? Salve, salve! Na tela, ele que é mexicano, né, nosso querido Hermano, que está organizando a Copa América com a gente aqui, que vai ter em novembro, né, vai ter esse ano, para quem não sabe, vai ter a primeira Copa América de poesia islã. O Comikk, que é rapper, MC, agitador cultural, poeta, faz um monte de coisa legal lá no México, vai estar aqui hoje com a gente para trocar essa ideia. Salve, Comikk!
¿Qué tal, hermana? Grandes saludos a toda la familia que nos ve a través del canal de la Fiesta Literaria de las Periferias. Y nada, estoy muy feliz, muy contento de estar aquí con todos y todas y todos ustedes.
Muy bien, hermanas. Já dou um saludo para todas desde a Via Yala, né, que nós estamos usando a Via Yala, que é uma palavra cuna, né, do povo cuna da Colômbia, né, numa subversão, porque América vem do Américo Vespúcio, colonizador. Então a gente está usando a Via Yala, que é esse nome que quer dizer essa terra fresca, essa nova terra, essa terra em florescimento. Então, que você pergunta, né, mas o que é esse Abiyala aí? Copa Abiyala quer dizer isso, né? A gente está usando, ao invés de América, Abiyala, e também América às vezes, né? Então, Abiyala, Copa América de Poesia Islã. Novembro está chegando, estamos muito ansiosos, né, Hermane?
Es correcto, ya prontamente estaremos disfrutando de todo lo que trae Abiyala Poetry Slam y de lo que traen los proyectos y los ejercicios sociales, comunitarios, ¿no? Que son súper importantes para abrazarnos desde todo el continente y a toda la familia que siempre está pendiente de lo que sucede en el Slam, como un lugar afectivo, de escucha y de ternura radical.
Muito bem. Falando disso, vamos chamar nosso outro convidado que vai estar aqui com a gente trocando essa ideia, né? Porque a ideia é assim, a gente na sala aí da sua casa, todo mundo em casa, a gente trocar uma ideia, conversar com o nosso convidado, assim como se estivéssemos num ambiente íntimo, e eu vou chamar ele, Emerson Alcaide, que está aqui com a gente também. Ele que é fundador do Slam da Guilhermina, primeiro slam de rua do Brasil, do Slam Interescolar, junto com o coletivo da Guilhermina, é escritor, é Slam Master, né, que é quem apresenta o Slam, e um agitador cultural também, faz um monte de coisa aqui pela cultura em São Paulo, é ator também. Eu falo que você é ator, pop, eu chamo ele de pop também. E ele vai falar um oi aí pra gente. Fala, Emerson Alcaide.
Salve, salve, Roberta, salve, Comikk. Valeu, Flup, aí mais uma vez, estamos junto. É nóis, mano. Prazer estar aqui nesse bate-papo aí com o fundador do Slam, Marc Smith, e com todos vocês. É nóis.
Gente, ele deu spoiler. Eu ia apresentar, ele deu spoiler. Tudo bem, irmão. Pois é, porque a gente tá falando do slam, e às vezes, né, tem gente que conhece, já tá na cena e torce, vê todo ano na Flup o Rio Poetry Slam, e pode ser que você esteja em casa vendo, o que estão falando de slam? É o slam? Eles estão falando do islamismo? Na verdade, a gente tá falando de slam, é S-L-A-M, é que a gente dá uma brasileirada e fala slam, mas se fosse nos Estados Unidos, falaria slam, ou poetry slam, que são slams de poesia. Esse slam é emprestado, uma terminologia emprestada do esporte, que quer dizer torneio. Então é um torneio de poesia falada, que tem 3 regras. Poemas próprios, no máximo 3 minutos, sem acompanhamento musical, qualquer pessoa pode participar, e você tem juradas que ficam ali e dão nota de 0.0 a 10.0, e a ideia primeira era ser uma grande brincadeira, porque o que importa mesmo são as poesias. E quem inventou tudo isso? Isso virou uma febre no Brasil, tá, gente? A gente tem mais de 200 comunidades espalhadas em 20 estados e uma febre em vários países do mundo, tem muitas comunidades, né? No México também é super forte. E a gente, simplesmente hoje, trouxe aqui na Flup ele, que inventou o slam, o criador, finalmente, com a gente aqui na Flup. Apresento-lhes barulho, faz barulho aí em casa também, para Marc Smith. Barulho para Marc Smith. Ele tá fazendo assim, ó, assim, porque ele fala assim, my name is Marc Smith. Aí todo mundo fala assim, so what? E daí? Né? Marc, say hello. Marc, diga oi.
Hey, everyone. So wonderful to be here and to be able to connect with people down there. It's great. It's a kind of a real dream come true that we can all be connected together, even though we're so far away from each other. It's wonderful.
Sim, e é uma vontade muito, né, uma antiga da Flup, trazer o Marc Smith. A gente estava planejando isso para 2020, 2021. Vamos fazer online, esperando, já que fica o convite para o Marc Smith vir aqui e estar de corpo presente aqui no nosso evento. E aí, Marc, a gente vai fazer essa rodada assim de perguntas e conversar aqui com você. Não sei se você sabe, hoje em dia no Brasil, o slam está espalhado em 20 estados, a gente tem mais de 200 comunidades, é uma febre mesmo, é uma modalidade assim que está nas periferias, que está nos centros. E, bom, quando você começou lá nos anos 80, não sei se você imaginava que ia chegar, porque em muitos lugares do mundo, né, a gente tem o Comikk aqui também, no México. Como é que você, porque para quem não sabe, eu vou deixar o Marc contar, queria que você contasse como é que começou lá numa brincadeira, né, e como é que você vê hoje, dos anos 80 para cá, essa explosão, como é que ver isso acontecendo, alguma coisa que você criou ali na brincadeira, né, sem muita pretensão do que virasse o que virou hoje.
Yeah, so first of all, that it spread all across the world, I never realized at the very beginning that would happen. I understood that it would spread across America, but I, like many Americans, had never really traveled, and so I thought, well, we're all so different. But seeing it spread across the world, it's shown me is that we are truly one species, and we are not that different. Maybe religions and institutions and governments and corporations try to accentuate the differences between us, but basically what's happened in the slam world and across the slam across the world, the same troubles, the same joys, the same conflicts, the same topics of the poems. It's all the same. We're truly one species, and the differences. Sure, there's differences, but they shouldn't be made into conflicts between us, because we truly are one human family. And if that could ever, it's idealistic, but if that could ever materialize as it in the rest of the world, as it has in the slam world, it would truly be a beautiful thing. as far as the way we started, yeah, we were outlaws. We were outsiders when the starting the slam. We didn't belong to any establishment. We were fighting against and playfully fighting against the powers of poetry at the time. And it was a joy. And it was very creative, very raw. We took chances and did stuff that people thought, oh my, you can't do that with poetry, but we did. It was a joyous time. And when I look at what's happening across the world, it's so great because that's the same spirit that you have. I know we've talked in Italy, and we've met with people around France and everything. That's what we do. It's a celebration of creativity.
Vamos chamar Comikk, hermana quer perguntar algo. Comikk vai trocar ideia.
Por supuesto que sí. Una pregunta, one question for Marc. Marc, how do you see, how did you feel about of the poetry slam in the pandemic?
The pandemic here, it stopped the show at the Green Mill that was still thriving, and I don't know if I'll ever. I've been offered to do, start up the show again at the Green Mill, but I've did it for 35 years. My latest project is the Last Word Quintet, which is a jazz band, and myself. I don't know. The pandemic kind of crushed everything. There are a few slams in the States that I think are back at it. Just talked to someone from Austin, and they have one in Austin, Texas going. But it kind of squished it down. Fortunately for me, in France, with you guys in Brazil and Mexico, those seem to be still thriving and coming back. And that's where my true joy is. My dream is that we started a project called One Poetic Voice in Chicago, where we've tried to mix the two languages operating together in performance, and it's a wonderful thing, and it can connect different cultures and different countries and in a very big way. So my view is more international than it is American. I'm kind of disgusted with America right now.
Thank you, Marc.
A gente vai fazer esse rolê assim, esse carrossel, tá, gente? O Emerson também quer trocar uma ideia, fazer uma pergunta.
Vou fazer uma aqui que eu fiquei pensando muito quando o Júlio me chamou para eu poder fazer essa... conversar com o Marc Smith. Inclusive, o Marc Smith está no nosso livro. Tem uma foto aqui. A gente fala tanto do Marc Smith, né? E aí, botei ele aqui no nosso livro como inventor do slam, né? É a orelha do nosso livro do slam da Guilhermina, o 5.6.0. Bom, a minha pergunta é o seguinte, pergunta número 1. Marc Smith, quais eram as suas referências literárias e musicais antes de criar o slam? O que antecedeu a criação do slam?
Yeah, I'm one of those old jazz guys. I grew up with Motown, listened to a great Motown station in Chicago, WVON, so I was into the Temptations and that, but I was truly a jazz guy. My roots are way deep into jazz. I wasn't a very good student. I discovered poetry when I was in college because I met my first wife and she liked poetry and I started doing poetry. But I read the classic poets of the time, and later got in, people like E. Cummings and D.H. Lawrence. So, I studied it once I found it quite a bit, but it was more the standard classical poems of the time. Then, when I got interested in writing, then I discovered what was going on in the contemporary world. And a lot of it at that time was like, oh, well, what is this? You know, it wasn't very accessible. It was too highfalutin. And that's what motivated me to start performing, because I thought, no, we need to be passionate. We need to talk about things that are pertinent right now, not, you know, abstract literary references. We need to talk about ourselves and what's happening. And that's how it started for me. The passion of performing and the musicality of poetry was what appealed to me. And that's how it started.
And Marc, in this movie Slam, Sworded Words, it's named in English, Kevin Covell from Chicago Young Authors talks about that one thing that he learned from you is how poetry slam served to organize community. And you had like a community organizer in Mexico. They are obsessed with this. Poetry slam is about the organized community. And we see the community being organized with the schools, the young people, the school slams that Emerson are organizing. So I wanted you to talk about this, how poetry slam helped you and you organized your community, and how it can help to organize community. Helps.
Yeah, so you know that's a good story, because when I started out, I was as egotistical and selfish as any egotistical, selfish artist can be. It was all about me, and I wanted a stage so people could hear me. And through that focus on ego, I really destroyed my personal life as a performer. Like many stories of artists that get into drugs and alcohol and that, I did that to myself. So as I was starting to really rise in the art world, my personal life was falling apart because of this egotistical, that it's all about me. I want to be a star. I want to be this. Fortunately, I sobered up and found a new life, a more spiritual path. And finding that, I understood that to be an artist is to be a servant to your community. And that's where all the service-oriented, the organization stuff started. Knowing that if you're a performer to an audience, you're lucky, and you should be in service to that community and audience. So, and that's what I've promoted since then. Unfortunately, in the slam world, there's always the real egocentric part of it, people who are just up there for themselves. But at the same time, there's all these great organizers that set the stage and make the stage for other people to benefit from. It's a conflict, but I'm on the side of the service-oriented stuff. So I applaud you, MC, because that's where it's at.
Gracias. Maravilloso. Creo que justo abona mucho al poder de la comunidad y cómo construir este tipo de narrativas tan distintas que se tienen también a través de la comunidad como un ejercicio social y de impacto operativista, ¿no? Entonces, pues eso, yo tengo que hablar otra pregunta para Marc. Marc, what are your favorite narratives in the slam poems?
What is my themes in the?
Yeah.
Your favorite narratives. Your favorite narratives, is it?
My own? Yeah. Or someone else's?
Your own.
My own. Oh, wow. Well, like I said, right now I'm working with the Last Word Quintet. which are all old guys like me, old jazz players, 4 of us and me. And I guess my favorites now are the stuff I'm doing with them, because it's Al Day is the singer-songwriter, and what I do with it is he has his songs, and I interlace my poems into his songs and write poems that complement his stuff. And it's it's kind of raw stuff. It's going back to just taking chances on what we're saying. For instance, he has a song, Suicide Town, which is, what's that about? Looking for love in Suicide Town. And I perform a Bertolt Brecht poem in it, that the refrain in it is, just as my mother said, you're so different. You're so very different. You're so different than everybody else. And it's kind of a fun thing, but it goes back to that root of us all being outsiders of the establishment when we started. That we were people on the outside, trying to get, not on the inside, but gathering an audience of other outsiders that weren't being represented by the established pop culture or the established literary culture. And I suppose I'm probably not answering the question, but right now I feel like it's important to get back to that, embracing the different, our differences, that we're different in a good way than everybody else. I don't know if I answered that question right, but...
Thank you, Marc.
Emerson Pop.
O que o senhor acha do Islã enquanto um instrumento pedagógico? O senhor acompanha o Islã que ocorria nos Estados Unidos?
Not so much. I'm aware of it, and I used to participate. I had a few years where I was teaching performance poetry in the high schools and in college. I got burned out of it because I'm not really a teacher. I'm a performer. And so I passed it on to other people, younger people, to do that work. It's taken on, people have embraced that all over the world. One of the very first that really took hold of it was Germany. Germany, a group created a whole government thing called U2, under 20. They created a whole system sponsored by the government to bring it into schools. So it's in schools all over Germany, and they wrote books about it. And my experience with it is that it is such a great, performance poetry is such a great teaching tool. It makes kids love this poetry that I have poetry, I don't want that. It makes them embrace it, but it also, like it did for me and many other people's, poetry was a doorway to opening me up to a more sensitive world, where it was okay to look at the beauty of the world and look at the emotional things that happen with us in our lives and express them and find out that you're not alone. You're not different from everybody else. People may put on their hard guy look, but inside there's a softness that the performance poetry has opened kids up to. It's a wonderful thing. France is also Grand Corps Malade and Yopo and Zurich in France have a whole organization that do that. And here's I don't know if you know about Grand Corps Malade, is kind of idol to me. It's a young guy. He has concerts all over France and reaches huge audiences. But he also goes back and helps with teaching and bringing performance poetry to the kids. it's a wonderful thing when done right. When it's opening up kids and showing them the beauty of art. I kind of don't like it to get too much into the competition because that just boosts the egos of people. But the performance poetry certainly is a great teaching tool. Sorry I'm talking so much.
It's great you talk about Grand Corps Malade because Floop is flirting with him for a while to bring him to, as we were flirting to you.
You should. He's a great man. He is a great man, a great model for performance poets.
And I think soon we're going to have him here. And I wish you could also see our Interscolar Slam, the slam with the kids, because it's something really, I was impressed the first time I was there because was very little children talking by themselves, because I think it's about this too. It's like a self-presentation. You don't need nobody to tell your story for you. You talk your story by yourself. And I bring here a question now that is from Luisa Romão. Luisa Romão is a slammer, a very famous slammer. She's a very great slammer. And she asked something about your book. She has your book because Marc has this book, Stage of Poetry Slam, and also another book, a lot, of course, poetry books, but another book that is Take the Mic. That is a new one. She has it. And she's asking, in your book, Take the Mic, you comment that the line between rhetoric and poetry has become blurred in slam circles. And she's asking you to comment a bit more about this frontier blurred between rhetoric and poetry.
Great. Well, I commend her that she noticed that and is of interest of it. It is a big thing because rhetoric, speech makers, politicians, they can be as great performance poets as we can. What their mission is to get you to believe. Rhetoric wants you to get you to believe as they do. Poetry, for me, is to present something that makes you think for yourself and find the conclusion. It opens your eyes to stuff you haven't seen before. It shouldn't, in my view, shouldn't be trying to persuade you to take any particular angle of life, a view of life. That becomes propaganda. And propaganda, as we know, is a very dangerous thing. Propaganda gets a mob of people to start doing things that it truly in their heart don't believe. But the propaganda makes them think this is it. That's the problem with rhetoric, which I look at sometimes as propaganda. Art can be, we've seen it. Art can be used as propaganda, and it's an unsacred thing to do because art is very powerful. And so, to me, I hope that I answered the question for her. That's the difference. Poetry should be just something that is presented, and all of a sudden, it opens your eyes to things you haven't seen before, but you're making up your own mind about it.
Emerson, tá por aí?
Sim, vamos lá.
Pode fazer a sua próxima roda viva aqui com o Marc Smith.
Vamos lá. O senhor nunca pensou em organizar um encontro mundial de slam? Eu fico imaginando, se eu criasse esse movimento, eu teria interesse em saber como ocorre o slam, sei lá, em Singapura, Moçambique, no Brasil. Não falo em fiscalização, mas como é que desenvolve em cada lugar? O senhor não tem interesse? Já fez isso alguma vez?
Oh, no, that's very much so. That's why we developed this, which I mentioned earlier, one poetic voice. And how it started with the Germans. I had we had the Speakeasy Ensemble, which was an ensemble I formed in Chicago. We matched them up with I forgot what their name is now, but with an ensemble from Germany. We worked together. We've got the German poems, got them translated, and then the Germans came to Chicago, and the two ensembles worked together for 2 weeks, forming a performance that had both languages operating at the same time. And through it, they learned about each other. They took great risks on how they did the translations. And what you got at the end was a performance that's happening in 2 languages, but can satisfy to a great degree people in the audience, people who spoke the different languages. Then we did it with the French for many years. A French ensemble would come to Chicago. We did it in Switzerland, and then we did it with in Budapest and this one was just fantastic. We did it at the European National Slam, where we had Polish, Slovenia, Macedonian, Czech, and forgive me, I can't remember a couple other. And we created a performance where we had all these different languages operating in one performance, not all at the same time, but in the one performance, that because in the Balkans, they had gone through such horrific times with the wars and everything, all these different people from these different countries were just weeping at the end of this performance because it was just so moving. And these were people, the Serbians were there. They were great. They were crazy, but they were great. These were people who were at war just years previously. It was truly a beautiful thing. So that's been my contribution to trying to look at it internationally. The great thing about this one poetic voice is that it's a technique. And it doesn't have to be just us doing it. Anybody can learn these techniques of working ensembles together or individuals together in a new way of translating that isn't blah, 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 blah. That keeps the richness and the passion of the poetry and the performance, even though it's happening in 2 languages.
Cool. Hermane,
I encourage you, MC, to think about this, and we'll do it somehow, And you too, Roberta, and you too, Emerson. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
It not only is the performance, but when the ensembles work together, they get to know each other, as Roberta and I know each other a little bit, and those friendships last a lifetime. And just think about that. If you got people working and you know each other, these conflicts are going to go away because you know each other. I'm not going to have a conflict with MC, because he's a Mexican and I'm American. Bullshit. He's a human being. I'm a human being. Forget that other stuff. So, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. We had this meeting with this slammer, Malaika Booker from England. That's how I met Floop, Julio Ludemir, one of the directors of Floop. And it was amazing, the encounter, how much we had in common and how the words that opened when we were together. And it's amazing, this kind of meeting, this kind of encounter. Comikk.
Sí, a mí me parece maravilloso como esta multidiversidad también de poder mirar estas diversas preguntas que se están fabricando, ¿no? Y que también están atañendo mucho de lo que sucede desde antes, con la experiencia de Marc y ahora en el presente, ¿no? Entonces, yo tengo una pregunta también para Marc, que se relaciona justamente con este nuevo proyecto que lanzamos hace poco. Y mi pregunta es, Marc, what do you think that now there is a conglomerate of people creating a first slam of the Americas on the continent, no? Through Abiyala Poetry Slam. What do you think?
I think it's wonderful. It's as I said before, it lifts my heart. I haven't been to visit you all, but I hear about it. I watch the slams on the internet here that happen, and it just makes me feel like it's the beginning that I experienced in Chicago, beginning again and again and again. And I just hope, and everybody knows I say this all the time, I just hope that you don't take the competition seriously. As soon as that competition thing gets serious, people start writing poems and performing to get 30 points, not from the heart. In the beginning, when we were on the stage, we weren't afraid of getting booed. We weren't afraid of just saying stuff that was true to our hearts to see what happened. And we didn't, some of us did it for the points, but none of us. The competition was a total game, just a nice kind of theatrical device for the show. Once it became serious competition and too many rules, oh my God. I was just with a guy, Iggy, who was a slam poet in Chicago, and he was on the team. I stopped sending teams to the National Slam because I got from Chicago because I got kind of disgusted with the competition part of it. But we sent a team with Iggy and Robbie Q and a couple other people, and their mission was, when you go there, break the rules. And they did, and it became one of the most historic moments in Iggy wrote this poem about sperms going up the fellation tube, and he got everybody in the audience being like little sperms going up, and they broke the rules because you're not supposed to have everybody doing stuff. I just hope the competition doesn't go the direction it did in some places in America.
Gracias, Marc. Thank you. Yo solo para abundar, y qué maravilla que salga este tema de la competición, porque efectivamente creemos un poco en lo que faló ahí, dijo Alan Wolf, ¿no? De que los puntos no son el punto es la poesía, o como nos gusta decirle acá, ¿no? The points is not the points is the community. Así que muchas gracias.
And Marc, we have another slammer called Midria. They asked something that seemed like what Luisa asked about the relationship between slam, capitalism. In this movie, Bob Homer appears, and I said, Bob, slam, I think slam, it's out. And Bob, that way that Bob says, it's all about capitalism. All that is inside capitalism becomes capitalism. And he breaks my leg because I was like, no, but it's Islam, but very romantic. It's all about capitalism. What is inside capitalism is capitalism. And how do you feel Islam going to movies, to the TV shows, to get in contact with this? How this influences positively, in a positive way, and in a negative way also. I know you have our opinion about this. We talked about this before. I want to know about this.
Well, yeah. My whole point was, as we've talked about, it was a community thing. So the reputation of slam was built upon lots of organizers, people that are completely forgotten, even by the slammers, in their own city. These organizers made it happen. And then when it got big, and everybody at the beginning like, oh, that's slam. Oh, that's, that's a fad. That's stupid. As soon as it gets really popular and really cooking, then all of a sudden people want to come in and take advantage of it. I would be on the phone, and at the beginning, we never had an organization. We didn't start an organization, a national organization, until 1995. And it was the biggest mistake I ever made. To create a bureaucracy for slam was terrible. But from 1986 to 1995, there was no organization. So we had no legal means to prevent people from exploiting it. So I was always on the phone talking to people. I remember a producer from Radio City Music Hall, that big concert place in New York City, was going to make us put a big show up, the Poetry Slam. I called this guy up on the telephone and told him, you can't do that. It doesn't belong to you. It belongs to thousands of people that have put their hearts and souls into this. You can't use it to make money for yourself. And that's my position. People like Grand Corps Malad, who have made a great career for themselves, have not done it by exploiting. He's just a great talent doing performance poetry, and he goes back and gives back to the community. But other people have used it just because, they've used it on TV commercials and stuff like that. You see slam on TV commercials and sitcoms. Those are people that are using an art form that belongs to everyone. Doesn't belong to me. It belongs to everyone. And capitalism as we know, capitalism exploits everything they can to make a buck. I'm not a capitalist. Neither is Bob Holman. He was just pulling your leg. Typical Bob, but
typical Bob.
Yeah, no. It art to me. Other people can disagree with me, but for me, art is a sacred thing, and no problem with artists making money. We all do, but not the drive to be the big star, and not to be a corporation or a business entity that profits off of other people's hard work and devotion. So that, I hope that answered the question. Yes, I'm an anti-capitalist, proud to be. I'm an old school socialist. I don't know what socialism means to people now, but I'm from back in the 30s socialist guy.
Great. Muito bem. Emerson Alcaide está na linha, vamos lá.
Aqui no Brasil, o slam é muito próximo do hip hop, do rap, né? Os MCs de batalhas, de MCs frequentam os slams, os quais se influenciam muito pelo hip hop. Eu sei que nos Estados Unidos também, né? Acho que não foi a origem, mas em algum momento o hip hop se aproximou muito do slam, até criando uma simbiose ali, né? Somente em Nova York, ali no New York Poets Café. Então, eu queria saber em que medida o hip hop influenciou no seu slam aí em Optal.
The way, so poetry, the slam and performance poetry and what we started was originally open to every style, every type of style, every type of performer, every type of person. It was always meant to be a house with all the different styles, from the classical works to rants to raps and everything, and thrived on that in the early years. All the slams were just grandpas talking, doing sonnets, young kids doing rants. In the early 90s, the hip hop artists wanted to find a way to expand from writing just their lyrics. At least I'm talking about Chicago and elsewhere maybe, but I know most about Chicago. they wanted, because the restrictions of working with the music were too tight for them. So then they started appearing at the Slam, and it's welcomed, because it's just another form of poetry. And Kevin Colville gave it a name, hip hop poetics. They came in and they loved it because now they weren't restricted by the musical form. I work, it's not a bad restriction. It's just that you have to work within the music to make it to fit. Here they could have a hip hop style that wasn't confined by the borders of music. Great. It was wonderful. What my but what concerns me is when shows become all one type of form because you cut other people out. There may be somebody in your community that has so much to say, and I don't want to work in the hip hop form. If they're not, if it isn't open to everybody, it's kind of getting away from what made this such a joyous thing now. Not to negate it, because as we all know, hip hop, I'm not a fan of gangster rap. It's misogynist and violent and that ain't me. But there's hip hop lyrics that are just mind blowing, that they're so profound and so well done. And the only objection I have is that, and it's not, the difference that I have is that what we started in Chicago was open to everybody, so, if you ain't going to get some grandpa or grandma or somebody who just wants to tell a story, and doesn't want to be, confined by the hip hop rhythm or the cadence or even the cadence of a sonnet or the cadence of any other form. That's the thing that I see that gets missing, that, I can't go there because I don't write poetry like that. There is no such thing as a slam poem. Every poem can be, if it's performed, is what it is, makes it a slam. So that's my objection. I hope I made myself clear.
Muy bien, a mí me gusta muchísimo esta charla que estamos teniendo porque estamos abordando muchos temas específicamente, ¿no? Desde la competición, cómo entra también el tema del mainstream y ciertos parajes, ¿no? Que en diversos territorios se desarrolla de una forma diferente, también hay que entender eso. Y bueno, llegando hasta ahora, ¿no? Como al tema del hip hop y cómo también se desarrolla ahí directamente o puede converger en diferentes narrativas o contranarrativas de diversos países, ¿no? En este caso. Y mi pregunta, la siguiente pregunta, Marc, Mexico and USA are very close, almost in the same neighborhood. And in that sense, language and listening process and different forms have a social impact. From this territory, we see many migrant poets. Do you have a favorite migrant poet? And what do you think of migrant topics, themes in poetry?
The beginnings of the slam, we were all lots of different. We had Carlos Cortez, who was this old socialist wood carver, etching man who did poems. David Hernandez, Carlos Coupion. We had a mix of Chicago, and there's a great population, Mexican population in Chicago. I grew up down in the Southeast Side. Went to, I was Jesse Montejano's best man at his wedding and all that stuff. The beginnings in Chicago were, everybody, we had the Serbians from the Southeast Side too. And we were such a great, without trying, we were just at the beginnings, we were just a mix of everybody. And over the years, folks from, India and folks, all kinds of different people came to the Green Mill to perform. And I would always make them perform in their own language, even though the Americans don't understand anything. I would make them perform in their language just to hear the beauty of the language. The immigrant issue, as you know, in America is just crazy. And we have old Trump to blame for most of that. I can tell you that for the most part, deep down in the hearts of average Americans, they embrace that, even though they get propagandized to be fearful of it. But I forget who she was, but I'm sure if I remember the name, you'd know her. She was one of your champions, came to the Green Mill. She came with her friend that did a dance on a wood board while she was performing stuff. The Green Mill show has been always open to everybody. And that's been my view, because I grew up at a time where Chicago was very segregated. I grew up in a high school where it had everybody, everybody, the Polacks, the Irishmen, the Jews, the Serbians, the Puerto Ricans. I mean, everybody was together. I was in a very mixed, and I come from that culture of knowing not to be afraid of other people. I hope, MC, I'm answering your question. I feel like you asked me a question and I don't answer it. I just go off on some other tangent, but that's me.
No, you're answering. It's a conversation. We go flowing with the ideas. And I have a question here. It's not a question, it's a curiosity from Julio Ludemir, one of the directors of Loop, that was very curious in knowing what performance you saw or what slammer you saw that blew your mind, that you can, if you can tell us a performance, unforgettable performance, and why that blew your mind, one or two, but one, I think that you always, that moved you really in your heart.
Well, what came to mind is because I was thinking about it earlier when you're talking about finding the slammer for your event from America. You know what I would suggest? I'd suggest getting Patricia Smith, the original. Patricia Smith she was it. And she started at the Green Mill. She came to the Green Mill. She read her second poem in front of an audience at the Green Mill, because I'd seen her at a party where she had done it and she was all psyched. I said, well, come to the show tonight and do another poem. And what I would encourage the poets after they came a while, I said, okay, because the competition was never important. The middle set, which was always a featured poet, and I would encourage them not just to get up there and just do poem after poem. I said, okay, Patricia, I want you to do the guest set, but I want you to create a show, not just poem after poem. Create a 15, 20-minute show that makes sense. And she came and did and became a book, Life According to Motown. And it was a series of poems that linked together about her life growing up in Chicago. And we were all, even me as the old white guy, I was influenced by Motown completely because I'm a diehard romantic inside. It was so moving for her because she's expressing her life in front of an audience, moving for the audience because they totally connected to it. And then the other one I remember is Sin Salach. Sin had been performing. She came in, okay, Marc, I have the guest set thing. I'm going to do what we kind of call the loofah method. And they came early to load in their equipment, and they had projectors and art. And I had been in the business long enough knowing that if somebody brings in a lot of equipment, it's going to be a disaster. They brought in this stuff, and they did their first show of the loofah method, which was multi-art, visual, sound, music, and everything. It was fantastic. It was something that could have been, put on Broadway. It was just so wonderful. And both of these experiences were because people were willing to break the mold and take risks of doing things that hadn't been done before. Patricia would be a great candidate. I don't know that she performs a lot now, but boy, I'd ask her, because what a greater thing would be, she might not want to compete anymore, but then she might. What a great thing would be to show your audience because she's a great writer. And I will tell you another little secret that don't let out. There's a big thing that is going to happen with her. So her reputation is going to be boosted up a little bit. So it would be really a plum for you if you could talk her into doing it.
Yes, let's think, hermano. I have an echo here. Eco aqui, gente, tudo bem? I didn't have the pleasure to meet Patricia Smith, but I had the pleasure to meet Sim Salaj. I went to her house when we shot the movie, and it was very impressive to see her in her house, in her kitchen, saying some poetry. Very, very strong and beautiful, her poetry. So I had this pleasure to see her alive in my face to saying some poetry. Emerson, Alcaide, quer perguntar mais alguma coisa, Emerson?
Sim. Primeiramente, gostaria de comentar que fiquei muito feliz quando o Marc falou que é socialista, né? Pois nós também somos, né? Faço parte do coletivo Estanda Guilhermina. Nós somos um coletivo que se posiciona à esquerda. Lógico que todo artista ele é de esquerda, né? Os que têm bom senso, mas nós temos uma bandeira realmente de esquerda enquanto coletivo. Eu queria fazer uma pergunta um pouco mais pessoal. Quando a gente procura no Google Marc Smith, aparece que é um trabalhador da construção civil. Mas eu queria saber o que o Marc Smith o que você era da construção? Você era um pedreiro, você era um engenheiro? O que o senhor fez na faculdade? Assim, né? Porque aqui falar assim parece que é alguém que trabalha quebrando pedra, subindo prédios, né? Então eu queria saber o que o senhor faz paralelamente ao Islã. O senhor trabalhava, apresentava o Islã e tinha um trabalho paralelo, qual era esse, né?
It's funny, I was just on the radio with a great friend in Chicago, promoting this show that I'm actually starting a new monthly show, an experiment next Saturday afternoon. You're all invited to it's going to be streamed. So you can, if you go to my website, markellysmith.net, you'll see the streaming link. It's my effort to keep this international thing going, because we're going to have 2 guests that are zoomed in. Hopefully in the future, maybe MC will do it, maybe Emerson will do it too, to give the Chicago audience a taste of international people. But when I was on the radio show, Rick was the guy who did the radio show, was one of the few people that ever did anything privately, private about my private life, because I kept my private life out of the public view for a long time. So not many people know much about me except Marc, this and that. And the thing they did for years and years, every article would be Marc Smith, the ex-construction worker, become poet. That was, and that's why it probably comes up on the Google, because that's what that's all they knew about me in my private life. Marc Smith, the ex-construction worker, become poet. And so that's why it probably comes up in Google all the time.
Yeah, we're laughing here. And we're seeing here in Brazil and all over the world, the slammers becoming younger. Black people coming more and more, LGBTQIA plus.
Plus.
And these bodies and voices. How do you feel that in an arc, the subjects and the speeches changed, and how do you feel that? I see, because you are we have this ocular testimonial, seeing all the story passing around you.
Yeah, well, you know, I can only truly speak of what the Green Mill was. And the Green Mill, I tried to keep it so that all the voices were there. And even until the last show, we had people older than me, grandmas and grandpas up on the stage with young people sneaking in underage. And we had a fairly good spectrum of topics and personalities and styles. And that was an effort to keep it that way. But I also know that, and it's okay, my whole thing was that each community should evolve a show that works for their community. And that means maybe particular style takes over or topics take over. Some places, it's very important to be very political because there's such an oppression that these voices need to be heard. Some places, people are not in political conflict, and they need to talk about what's in their hearts and what's happening. For instance, the thing I mentioned about the Balkans, those poems weren't about political positions. Those poems that they shared that made people weep were about what was the result of being in these conflicted areas and what it did to you as an individual and as a human. So it was always the intent that each community evolves a show that works for their community. And how do you tell if that's happening? You tell that you can understand that that's working because it's not just poets reading poems to poets. It's a group of poets that has a larger audience of all kinds of different people. That's, for me, the judge of when performance poetry or art is working, when it's open to everybody. If you have a museum exhibit of visual art and only high-class people go to see it and everything, is that really doing it? No. But if you have the public art that some executive or millionaire can stop and look at, and the same time some homeless guy is looking at and appreciating it, I think from my point of view, that's where we want to be with art, that it connects on a deeper human level, that it doesn't matter who you are or what status in society you come from.
Yes, cool. We have time for one more question. We are walking to our final moments. Comikk, ¿quer falar mais alguma coisa?
Sí, claro. Igual, thank you, Marc, por su presence here. Y la verdad es que me parece súper maravilloso que se haya tenido este encuentro, esta exposición de diversas perspectivas, desde diversos mundos en la mente. Y mi última pregunta viene dirigida más al estudio y a la investigación, ¿no? Entonces, Marc, do you consider that the academic fields contribute something to the slam? Or do you think that the community is the one who should be in charge in the researching and studying the slam?
Well, at the beginning, there were some very courageous academics that came into the slam and performed at the slam. They were the courageous ones. They were the outsiders too, that didn't want to follow the rules of academia, even though not only in Chicago, but all over the world, the first thing that happens when the slam comes along is that the academics are going to say, oh, that's not poetry. It's happened in everywhere it's gone. It's hilarious. But now for instance, Patricia Smith, Tyemba Jess, Jeff Daniels, they all teach. They teach. Performance poetry is taught in the university. The university can kind of confine it, but they're not as much of an outsider as they used to be. But they are still, in my opinion, they're an institution. And I think we have to be wary of all institutions, because what do? They institutionalize the revolution. And all of a sudden, they're telling us this is how it's supposed to be. I think that only our honest hearts can determine, what the passion of our art should be. That's just me, because I'll be an outsider to the day I die. Nobody's going to give me a professorship. Absolutely not. But I think what you're asking, the divide diminishes, because after a while, the academics see, oh man, these people, probably like Emerson's student thing that's happening, this is reaching people, this is connecting to people. And instead of fighting against it, they start using it as a tool. Because academia is teaching. It is not the source, the primary source of passion and creative art. It's talking about creative art, and maybe some great professors, academics become great poets and everything, but the institution is about examining and understanding art. It's not truly about producing art. Art gets produced out there on the street and in everyday life, from my point of view.
And right now we also have a lot of people studying. I know that are great. Susan Somers. There are some great academic works about slam in the United States, and now in Brazil, avalanches of like it's raining works about poetry slam in the universities. That is good. There are some points that in this kind of appropriation of it being too distant, but in general, it's great to have people studying this. So I'll ask to Emerson, Comikk, say your last words to Marc, and Marc say your last words, and we're gonna close because we have time right now ending.
Thank you, Marc, thank you for existing, y nada, nos vemos pronto, hermano, nos vemos. Gracias.
Emerson, últimas palavras para fechar aqui.
Quero agradecer aí pelo papo aí, pela Roberta, pela mediação aí de conduzir esse papo, ao Comikk, meu parceiro lá do México, né? E fiquei muito feliz de conversar com o Marc e a proposta dele, né, de fazer trabalhos em conjuntos. Eu e a Roberta já fizemos alguns experimentos, né? Fizemos o Pantanal, que era um teatro, que ela fez a orientação, né, no slam, o Comikk, fizemos já. E fiquei feliz aí com, talvez um dia, nós, eu, Comikk, Roberta e Marc Smith, podemos fazer uma performance juntos. Seria incrível.
So I want to thank you one more day. Marc Smith is known by the Slam Papi, so thank you. And I remember that when I started Zap here in Brazil, the first Slam in Brazil in 2008, I was in the day before thinking, how can I do these rules? I didn't know the rules, nothing. And I looked for this email, Slam Papi, and I sent Marc Smith an email. Hi, Marc, do you accept to be the godfather? Que cara de pau. Do you accept to be the godfather of Zap Slam? And I have some doubt in some rules. Can you help me? And I was amazed that in the day after, he answered like, yes, I accept be the Godfather, God bless you, have luck. And I don't know if I have my book. It wasn't this book, but it wasn't ready. I have some proofs, a part of my book that I can send you. Please don't send to anyone because the book is not released yet, but I will send you. And I was shocked because he sent me a book in very trusting in me and very heart open with this. And in this book, there is something that tells that a philosophy of Islam is the old Islam, the older Islam past everything he knows to the newer Islam. And he did this. He did. He talked the talk and he walked the walk. And I thank you very much for being so heart open and be our godfather of Zap and a good friend, and opened his house to us to film Islam, received us there with Marc Elveld. And thank you.
Thank you. And believe me, you guys lift my soul up. It's a gift come back to me just to see what you're doing, and it's just wonderful. So I sure hope that we can all get together. It would be good. But do it fast, because I'm an old guy, and I don't know. I could drop dead right after this, you know.
No, you're coming soon. Marc está pedindo que façam logo. Esperamos que essa onda toda que nós estamos, né, já mandando um abraço aí para todas as famílias que perderam seus entes queridos, estamos ainda, né, ainda terminando essa pandemia Covid, esperamos que saiamos logo dessa. Muito obrigada a todo mundo, Marc, Emerson, Comikk, e vocês todos que estiveram com a gente aí na FLUP, que sempre tiveram todos esses anos acompanhando o Islã e que estão aqui nesse evento também. Vamos, que o som não pode parar, como diria Taíde. Muito obrigada, até a próxima, tchau.